and we facilitate kids zone for corporate events, annual festivals, religious parties, as well as birthday parties. Our job was mainly to get the children and parents outside of their homes and provide fun and bonding while at it. As soon as the announcement was made, customers cancelled bookings and we had to refund our customers' monies. And so that meant that I also had to make some tough choices. I had employed 19 people. So these 19 people are not working right now. They do not have any form of income. Most of my employees are low-income earners, and they survive a day at a time. And so, especially the casuals, I would pay them after a day's work. And that money is meant to take them through the week. Some of them will call if they need. One of them had a baby the other day, and I try as much as I can to help them, just from my own pocket.
Corona imetume sana. Mimi kama DJ personally, nimekuwa nikiwork, let's say 6 days in a week. You get paid daily, hand to mouth. Unafanya job yako unalipwa. Na sai like 2 months now sijakuwa na job.
As a manager, I did not lay off my staff, but we gave them unpaid leave.
But after this pandemic, things zilienda south. Kila mtu anakuambia ile kidogo ako nayo, atanunua chakula ama atanunua nguo. Unaona, tulikuwa na wateja. Na hata watu watoki nyumbani, hata wewe nikikuzia ukivaa, ungependa uzi vaa ukakaa kwako, wataka uvae wenzako kuona wako compliment usikie vizuri ama vipi?
A lot of people relating to what is happening in as far as the loss of income is concerned, and we've all experienced loss either of a job, business, or even through death. Now, this naturally leads to a grieving process, with the death of a loved one seemingly lingering longer due to the permanency it brings. It is imperative to allow the process to take place to enable healing. Now, I spoke to a counseling psychologist who says taking on unhealthy coping mechanisms could actually risk your general wellness.
Our uniqueness as human beings not only lies in the difference in our fingerprints, but also in the way we grieve.
There are people who are serious and fast grievers, so I may take a shorter time, but I'm a heavy griever. And then there are those who, they may take a longer period, but they do it in sort of bits.
There is no right or wrong way to grieve, but there are healthy ways to deal with the grieving process. This calls for a great deal of self-awareness.
I may lose a spouse, but I have lost a provider, a father to my children. So I have to grieve these different roles that they played over time. So if I am coming to grieve this loss, if I have not mourned other losses in my life, it becomes compounded. From where I come from, the environment, how do people perceive loss? If it's at the workplace, how do we mourn a colleague? Do we assume they're not your family, they're just a statistic? It's not an employee, will get another one.
Though there isn't a typical response to loss, it is imperative that you let the process take its course to ensure healing. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance are said to be the 5 stages of grieving. Therapists warn that not everyone faces them in the same way and order. The pain of loss can feel overwhelming even for the best of us, but circumventing the grieving process could cost your general wellness.
Sometimes even just asking, so Gladys, how are you doing after so-and-so passed on? I am able to pick as a management, where are you at? As much as I need the deadlines met, are you also running down into depression while you're meeting because you could be overworking, you're meeting the deadlines, but your overworking is destructive.
Gladys, Gachanja, NTV.
So it goes without saying that we are going to actually focus on loss and grief even as we mark the Mental Awareness Month, which is May. And to help us have this conversation with me in studio, we have Dr. Priscilla Macau, who is a medical doctor and a psychiatry resident. Thank you for your time. We are also joined by Brian Emmanuel Vatuli, who has lived experience with loss and grief and, of course, mental illness too. And of course, Rosa Sanao, who is a counseling psychologist. Thank you all for joining me. I'll start with you, Dr. Makau. I mean, it goes without saying that we all have lost some sort of normalcy to our lives. In your case, what has shifted?
One, the connectedness, the fact that I'm not able to meet people physically. I'm big on that, on just meeting people and going to places, visiting others. And then now I'm just, either going to work because I'm an essential worker, or I'm at home, which is a bit different from the normalcy that I was used to.
And speaking of essential work, have you found yourself in a position where you've got to deal with people who've lost loved ones or lost one thing or another?
Yes. I'm in the mental health field, so you find people who maybe they were at the verge of losing their jobs, and then now they actually lost their jobs. You have people who maybe they've lost their loved ones, they don't know how, they can't reach there, so they don't even know how to react to it. So yes, loss is everywhere.
And for you, maybe we should ask you as a daktari, because everyone thinks daktaris are, untouchable. But what can you say has actually pointed you to loss in your own life?
Currently, I just think the fact that I'm not able to, mingle with the people that I usually do with, that for me is big, because I'm a people's person at the end of the day.
Any impact on your life?
Yeah, I'm not functioning, I think, as, I would before. But yes, we are able to cope and just do, to get by.
And would you call that grieving in itself?
Yeah, in its own way, because you don't have like a specific script on what grieving should be or how it should look like, or the typical or the atypicals. You don't have that, but it's how you're feeling through it. It's a process that you go through when you're losing something. It can be a mental process when you're just there, you're having anxiety, when you're sad. It's just a mental process you're going through, or a physical one. You're not able to sleep well, you're not able to eat correctly. That's already, you're going through a grieving process, right? Or social withdrawal, you're not able to connect. You feel like you're not yourself during that, after the loss. Then yes, you're going through some grief process.
And now that you mentioned, and we also mentioned, the loss of jobs is also something that can make you grieve for sure. What are other areas that actually put you at that point of loss and grief?
So like currently we're seeing people, the loss of quote unquote our normalcy, where you are so used to, you wake up at this particular time, you leave the house, you go to work, you're in the jam or something, you're talking to people, the normal day-to-day activities are actually disrupted. That's already a loss that people don't really seem to look at. Even on Sundays or Saturdays, the days of worship, on Fridays, people come together, they, commune together, but that's not happening. And that's already a different form of loss. Of course, there's the economic part where now everyone can see you're not able to go to work, you're not able to function properly, you're not able to be productive. That's already a different kind of loss. So loss doesn't really necessarily have to be the death of someone. You can lose different things. You can have loss of relationships where you're not able maybe to connect, to talk to your spouse or significant other, and then now maybe they're living in a different town, you're having disagreements, so you don't even know you're losing them, or you've gone through a divorce process, you've lost your normal, how you saw your life, it's not there anymore. So you find those are different ways of types of losses that we usually don't look at. We just look at the loss of, a death, a loved one in your family, or, colleague at work. But in real sense, just the moving. They even say now schools are closed. Children are losing, quote unquote. They are experiencing it because their normal was they wake up, they go to school, they will have teacher so-and-so, teacher Anne is awesome. Then they'll be sitting with Ken and they talk, and then all of a sudden, they're at home.
And they can't play with each other.
They can't play with each other. They're stuck at home. Maybe their best friend is literally next door, but they can't do that. So even they are going through their own form of losses that we will not really pinpoint, but it happens.
Okay, Rosa, so now let's bring you into this conversation. And we're all going through many changes due to COVID-19. What is your experience?
Well, for me, I have experienced the change that I may not be able to see most of my clients physically. And so just adjusting the switch to virtual counseling and doing online counseling, as well as having so many trainings and mental health awareness meetings cancelled. So that threw me off balance quite a bit, and I had to adjust. So I had to grieve and adjust to a new normal.
Okay, and we're talking about people adjusting and others are having a difficulty in the same. And Dr. Priscilla has touched on some of the signs and symptoms that you are grieving. Which are some of those that you can highlight on?
So some of the symptoms, I think I can highlight them in terms of the stages of grief, because one of the things that is common and very natural is that you go through denial, the shock phase of it's happening and yet it's not happening. So you know grief is happening at head knowledge, but heart knowledge is I still don't know what's happening. So there is being numb, you're in shock, you may feel like I cannot believe this. Some may be withdrawn in that moment, but that is normal and necessary to help us adjust to the legal and the physical requirements of adjusting after a loss, especially in time of death. And then we have anger. And anger is, how can this be happening? Why me? If it is death, you're wondering, how did the death happen? Is there someone to blame? There is anger towards God for them that believe in God, because you're feeling that God is all powerful and he let this happen. There is depression. So depression is accompanied by all the signs, which is sadness, withdrawn, isolation, prolonged periods of crying, which you're not able to explain or put into words. You may have sleeping problem, you're either oversleeping or having insomnia. You may have eating problem, you're overeating or unable to eat. Lethargy, dragging yourself, you feel like you cannot have strength literally to even get off the bed. So those are some of the signs that we would associate with grief. And we say that it is very normal. There is also the stage of bargaining, where you, especially for people who are going through anticipatory grief, you are like, God, if you give my loved one more chance, if they are well, I will do so and such a thing. If only I had gone to the hospital earlier, if only I had reconciled with my loved one before they died, if only I had met the deadline. So you're experiencing the bargaining phase where you're thinking, probably there's something I could have done better. And this stage comes with a lot of guilt and self-blame. You feel like I must have done something to contribute to that loss. And so one of the things about bargaining is that we encourage people to look at what they did best within the resources that they have as a human being. And then we get to a place of acceptance. And acceptance sometimes does not necessarily mean that you have, quote unquote, accepted the loss as it is, but you're at a place where you are moving at heart knowledge to know that the loss has happened. I have lost my loved one. So how do I begin to move on? And in this place, we find that people are able to reach out for help. They're able to talk about how they feel. So in a nutshell, those are the symptoms that we can pick on.
Okay, and clearly there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Let's bring in Brian Emmanuel, who has lived experience with loss and grief. What is your experience, Brian, especially in this time of COVID-19?
Thank you, Gladys. So the experience that I have at the moment is there was a job I was supposed to take up a month ago, and when the pandemic broke in our country, everything had to stop, and every plan that I had after that had to postpone them and it was so hard for me to even accept that I have to stop everything because of what we're facing right now. And I remember feeling a lot of anger, like she said. There's a lot of, you feel disappointed, you feel that you had your hopes too high, and you realize that you should have been more prepared. But at the end of it, you end up accepting it. I still have the same feelings to date, because a lot of things had to go not according to plan. So it's it's quite difficult. Just like she said, it's difficult, and but the best thing, the thing is how to cope with the whole thing, because we can't stick on the same focusing. We can't keep focusing on the problem. You have to think of how you're going to cope and move forward away from the challenge.
Okay, Brian, before we get to the coping, let me ask Dr. Priscilla, are there specific signs that one is dealing with loss and grief now with COVID-19, or are the same applying to when you're going through general loss and grief?
So we can't say we have specific things that you're like, this is it. But of course, you'll be going through, as I said, the mental symptoms that you're having, the mental reactions that you're going to be having, the whole feeling sadness all the time, maybe you're feeling worthless, you're easily irritated, you're not able to sleep well, you're not able to eat well, the loss of appetite is something that's there, although there are people who will end up eating more or sleeping more than the required hours. And then it's happening now that, you know, you're home, you're able to pick it from yourself or somebody else. Yourself, if you're self-aware, you're like, this is not my normal, or somebody else is like, something else is going on. So it's something that, you know, with the COVID pandemic, because now we are home and it's the different part of it, so you're able to pick it up. But we can't say with COVID-19 we have like, this is a new thing that COVID-19 has brought up, but the signs and symptoms will definitely be there.
Maybe the situation or circumstance around it, social isolation, lockdowns,
yes, they make it worse.
Would that make the situation worse?
Yes, because, you know, one of the way when you're saying you're going through loss, you want people to come together, you want them to comfort you. If you've lost your job, you want to sit with your friends, strategize on the way forward. But then now you can't do that. You're left to sit on your own, especially like if you're staying alone. So you just go back to your house and it's just you. You're not able to have just the human presence, you know, of another person next to you. Even if they're not saying anything, just the fact that they're there. So that actually is different from how we are dealing with the grief on normal days. And also that will be different in how you manage the grief and the losses that come through during this season, where now you'll have to come up with other ways, you know, of dealing with it. For example, you have to connect with people. It's a good thing, I usually say, that in this age, you know, it's not like the 1900s where you didn't have phones, you know, now you can do video calls. You can check on each other by calling and seeing how this person is doing. Like just the other day, we had a Zoom quote-unquote hangout where you just sit in front of your, you know, device and see the other person. You're not talking, you're not, you know, high-fiving, but you're able to just see them. And that's a different aspect, and it's good because it brings about the social connectedness. As much as we are physically distancing from each other, you're able to just connect. And I usually say with the 9 weeks that you've been home, I just realized there's a friend you've not talked to in a very long time. So now you can pick up, you have the time to actually call people and check up on them, which is one of the things that is different from before. Even in how we are managing in telecounseling, it's different now. Currently, we are big on the virtual management, where you're able to call your patient or they call you, and you know, you discuss the signs and symptoms, how are they doing. So it's a different way of coping with the loss, but it's still there. It's just that we're introducing new aspects to it.
Okay. Now, even as we talk about loss and grief, definitely, as Daktari has said, that loss not only speaks to death, it also speaks to the loss of income and jobs. And here's the Cabinet Secretary for Labour, Simon Chalugui, addressing job losses in April, where he suggested employers should allow their employees to take their normal leave days, take leave on half pay or unpaid leave in some instances.
We as the Ministry of Labour, together with the CAS and the PS and the whole team, we have engaged in high-level social dialogue with employers through FKE and with employees or workers through KOTU. And what we are saying is, for the first 30 days of this problem, let us engage, let's allow people to proceed on normal leave. So they will get their pay, they will proceed like normal. Then if this thing persists, then the next 15 days, we can extend, some employers are saying they can extend by another 15 days.
Well, that is the reality of COVID-19 and the impact on jobs and businesses. And speaking of job losses, we're now joined by Eddie Kimani, who is a mental health champion. Eddie, when they talk about job losses, you've worn these shoes and you know how much it can lead to total loss and grief, right?
Yes, it's not the easiest thing to deal with. I mean, as what Dr. Makau has highlighted on, especially on this very important topic during this time, loss cannot only just be about losing a loved one. We are losing many things that we've been accustomed to over life, and jobs, employment, that source of income, that source of livelihood being lost is going to have an impact. It's already having an impact in our day-to-day lives. And it has an impact which has really affected families, individuals, companies, organizations. So yes, job losses and just the job market has been negatively impacted by what we are experiencing right now because of this unprecedented times and this pandemic. So yes, it's a very difficult time. Mm-hmm. And it just calls for a lot of re-engineering how we now understand the new normal. I like the hashtag on this show. Of course, it's the new normal, and that's what we have to deal with.
Now, Eddie, you have a personal tale on how you've dealt with the loss and grief in as far as your career is concerned. Just in a nutshell, give us a tidbit of what you went through.
Well, in my case, it wasn't per se a job loss. I had my job came to a close, but at the time I was going through my own mental health challenges, which brought along depression and anxiety, which I had to deal with. But then again, there's a lot of relation to that, to what I'm going through right now, and a lot of men and women are going through out there right now in terms of losing that livelihood, not being able to have a guaranteed source of income to be able to support or sustain either your family, yourself, or even your business. But it's been a journey, and I was fortunate in the course of this year, early this year, to be able to have gotten an opportunity to work for one of the corporate companies here, and I only got to work for a month and a half. But then again, the company was hit hard, and they had to take drastic decisions by putting on hold certain job positions and putting that off. So yes, it now brought me closer to that thought that this is what you feel and go through when you lose a job. So it has not been an interesting phase, especially when you lose your livelihood. It's difficult, it's tough, and then now brings in the element of the mental health challenge, because when your normal is disrupted, you definitely will have some impact in your mental well-being. And yeah, it's not as easy. It's difficult for a lot of people globally, and of course closer to home here, it's difficult.
Okay, Eddie, let's cross over to Rosa Sanao. Now, Rosa, even as we listen to Eddie, you can hear he mentioned being a man and dealing with loss and grief is even more difficult in these uncertain times. Are we saying dealing with loss and grief is different for both women and men?
Well, loss is different for each and every individual. So loss is very unique depending on gender, depending on how do I handle loss on a general scale, my personality, my upbringing. Religion also plays a factor in loss, and social culturalization and how as a society we perceive grief varies from one society to another. But with regard to gender, what I can say is that generally men are perceived to not talk as much as women will do, and also reaching out for help. So you will find that generally women reach out for professional help more than men would. And I think that compounds. And even as Eddie is talking about the loss of livelihood, now with regard to reaching out for help. So if this man is a breadwinner, he's just lost his livelihood and he's considering reaching out for help. So he's considering, do I reach out for help or do I feed my family? And there is also now how society has viewed and placed men in a box that they have to behave as macho, you know, and look the part, look like they have things together to fix it. And in that moment, all they need is just to say, I feel like the world is crumbling down and I just need to talk about it. Even as a society, look at how we bring up our children. Do we allow our young boys to cry? Growing up, we tell boys, you know, why are you crying like a girl? You know, and that already begins to send a perception that expressing my emotion is weak and is seen as vulnerable. And so as an adult male, this man may be unable to express his emotion. And now one of the things that is important in dealing with grief is the expression of emotion. So yes, different factors play out in how we grieve, including gender.
Okay, now Brian, you have lived experience with mental illness, and that you had mentioned earlier has actually been made, has given you some sort of exacerbated by the situation we are in right now, right?
Yes. So it was it became a trigger. So what happened after everything happened? It triggered a lot of things. And because of the anxiety that came in, it led to some of the symptoms to start, you know, cropping up again. And it wasn't. It's not quite. It's not. I don't know how to put it, but it's not an easy thing to cope with, especially at this moment. You're not close to your friends. You're not close to family. And the people who you run to at the moment, they're not that close to you. So it's a bit hard. Yes.
You had also mentioned social distancing is something else that was a huge trigger for you, right?
Yes, because for me, proximity to people who are close to me makes me feel safe, and they're the people who I run to whenever I'm facing a problem. So when this social distancing came in and the proximity to the people who I run to became distant. So it heightened my I became more alert. My anxiety just kicked in, and stress kicked in, and there was a time actually even started experiencing some depressive symptoms, and I had to even go to my therapist at some point. So it has been, the social distancing has really impacted me in a very negative way.
But so, even as you are social distancing, as a guy, as we are mentioning, men could have a harder time reaching out. Are you having a hard time reaching out, being vulnerable?
No, I don't have a hard time reaching out, but and that's because I became more aware, and I came to understand that having a mental illness doesn't mean that I'm weak, and especially being a guy, it doesn't mean that I'm weak. So I come into that realization and understanding that having a mental illness is just like having any other illness, and you can cope and you can be able to live with it. Made me realize that I can manage it. I can continue with my livelihood just like any other person, as much as I know how to cope with the illness.
Self-awareness is very important, Dr. Priscilla. Just to let you know that Brian Emmanuel lives with borderline personality disorder and clinical depression. So it is encouraging to hear him offer home as such. What are your suggestions for those that are living with mental illness at this time?
So first of all, I'd like to big up, you know, Brian, because it's really good when you feel nice when someone actually comes out and say, yes, you know, I have this mental illness, but I'm doing well, I am self-aware. So big up for that. Yes, currently it's hard for patients who are having mental illness. As you said, the social distancing is a trigger. Even the, you know, the loss itself is a trigger. The fact that you're not able to be with people is a trigger. One, we are encouraging people to, if you're not, one, you are doing tele-counseling, so, or telepsychiatry, where you can call your psychiatrist if you have a therapist that you're following through, your psychologist, you know, talk to them, do your consultation over the phone. There are those who will not be able to do that. We are looking at if you're on medication and maybe you're in, you used to come to Nairobi, for example, for your medication. It will be good to continue your medication. So just go to your the nearest hospital. Explain to the doctor who's there, because ideally at the end of the day we have the basic training. So when you explain to the doctor, they'll know your signs and symptoms, they'll look at the medications that you're on, because if you're on medications, we'd rather continue with your medication than stop them, because already the triggers are there. So if you don't continue with your medication, then it's going to just be full-blown and you'll not be able to not to fit in the society, which is something our medication and the therapy that you're going through is trying to manage, right? So we want you to be able to be on your medications. Another thing, another avenue that you can use is the 1199, where there's always a counselor on the other side. So they talk to you, you will talk to them, actually they listen through, and they're able to help you get over and get through actually this pandemic period. So yes.
Okay, Eddie Kimani, when we talk about mental illness, you have an experience of your own, and in the spirit of encouraging other men to come out and speak of their experience, what is your experience?
Well, it's rightly so put by specialists and experts that yes, men have a challenge when it comes to expressing their emotions, being in touch with their emotions, being able to embrace and being vulnerable enough to even to ask for help. And especially in this period that we are going through, and as we've also mentioned in this discussion, men are having it rough, especially being the breadwinners of many a home. So you find they're put in a position where they really have to come up with solutions and ways that they can continue providing for their families, to be able to support their families, and not only just providing, but being able to just being mentally healthy, to be able to be that key person in a family unit. Yes, it's a challenge, and it's a conversation that I feel we still have to continue going on, but because it has all stemmed from the fact that we've been wired in a way to believe that men have to act and be in a certain way, they have to do things in a certain way. So when it comes to matters of vulnerability, it becomes very difficult even to handle such situations as we are going through right now.
Eddie, you have experience with depression. How did you cope with it?
My experience has been an eye-opener, let me say, and I'm very grateful that I was able to, or rather gone through what I went through, because without that I would not have understood why Eddie should embrace vulnerability. If you ask me right now in terms of being able to know how to deal with my emotions and being vulnerable, I'm in a much more better place, having gone through my own dark season, to be able to understand what it means to embrace how I feel, being able to express how I feel, being able to reach out for help as a man. And again, we've been, as I said, we've been wired to believe that when a man reaches out, it's a sign of weakness. But I would like to quash that and encourage men to understand that reaching out is part and parcel of how we are wired as human beings. And every male or female reaching out is just a sign of being able to get in touch with yourself, with your feelings, and being able to respond even to how you feel. So I was able to now understand how I should feel and respond to certain instances and things that I might be going through in my life. And as I said, I'm in a much more better place right now to deal with my vulnerability, to deal with embracing my emotions and understanding how I'm feeling, and being able to just still be a man and not be crushed by that age-old descriptions of what a man should be.
Okay, there's a question here for you, Eddie. There are people who do not know your story and they would like to hear it. In a nutshell, what are the losses that you experienced?
Well, I went through a period of depression and anxiety after I got myself. This was all self-inflicted from this, in the sense that I made wrong decisions in my life which affected me personally, my family, between 2015 and 2018. But all that is in the past now. But I lost for a period of time my family. I lost for a period of time the love that you would expect to share together with your children. And the loss of recently, I lost a job recently. And losing that and now looking at what we are losing. Remember, we are social beings, and we are wired to be social in very many aspects. So I lost a lot. I've lost a lot of that now, but my story, of course, just stands for me as a journey to being able to embrace what I'm going through right now. And as I said, the worst for me is in the past. But again, like everybody else, losing either a loved one, losing a sense of purpose, losing your sense of dignity, when you get into these spaces of depression and anxiety, it takes away a lot from you. And that in very many ways, maybe even Dr. Makau might just expand on this, the loss of your normal day-to-day when you're going through challenges such as depression, such as anxiety. Those are losses that I went through, which I must say I'm happy that I'm away from that right now, and I'm able to handle things differently right now with the lessons that I've learned through that period of loss.
Speaking of which, Brian, you mentioned you've also lost a lot due to the fact that you live with mental illness. What are the things you've lost?
I've lost. There's a time I had to stop schooling when I was in college, and it's because I experienced a major episode when I was in college. So I had to stop my studies so I can go home and get some treatment and get back to my usual self. And there's a time in 2018 I also lost a job because of the same, and a lot of encountering a lot of stigma at a certain workplace. So I had to let go of the job because it wasn't conducive enough for me to be even productive in the first place. So I had to let go of a job of the job. And also, I've lost even friends due to the same. I've lost relationships, because of the same. And over time, I came to realize that I can't really blame them for how they reacted to the whole thing, because when I look back at the events that happened, I realized that it's just the lack of information and the lack of understanding of what mental health is in the first place. So yeah, the losses are there, and they had a negative impact on me, but I also took something positive from the whole experience.
And you'll be sharing that with us in a moment, Daktari. Loss coupled with mental illness sounds very intense. How do you deal?
So yeah, self-awareness is one of the things that it would be good to have. And then also, if you're mentally ill already and you've accepted, you have insight that I got through this process. I have maybe you're depressed, for example. You have a major depressive disorder that you're dealing with at that particular time. You're maybe on medication, or you're now on psychotherapy. One, that you need to be aware of that. And then, given during this pandemic, you're not able to go out, because you usually say go out, mingle, exercise, run outside, but now you're not able to do that. So pick it up early. That's usually one of the things we are really, really advising. Then now you keep on doing your sessions. If you, with your therapist or the doctor who's the psychiatrist who's following you up, if now they're like, oh, maybe we need to put you back on medication just to stabilize you. Because at the end of the day, we want you to be able to live productively in your day-to-day activities. That's the whole idea. because that's what mental health is. You're able to have your productive, be able to give back to your community. So we want to put you in that state once again. We want you to go back to that. Yeah, that's what we are looking at. So yeah, I think that.
And stigma, Bren has talked about it.
Stigma is something that, as a society in the world, we need to work towards getting rid of it. And how do you do that? Awareness. I think, from my perspective, is you will stigmatize someone because you don't understand what that process is. Because one thing with mental illnesses is you're not immune. As long as you're alive, you can get one form or another of a mental illness. Nobody is immune. So you have to start from there, that as much as you think there's a problem with that guy, guess what? It can actually happen to you. So you have to get more information about it. What is this? What do we mean by mental health? We mean you're able to do your day-to-day activities. You're able to be productive to yourself, to the community. You're able to have normal coping mechanisms. Then from there, if this person is not able to do that, how do you help them? Instead of looking down at these people, because it's just a phase that they're going through, most of them. We just have very few like chronic illnesses. Most it's a phase that they are going through. And when they come out of it, they're able to work. And I think one of our best, like even in the workplace, your best employees will be people who are going through something. Once they bounce back, it's beautiful. They work pretty well. So we need to be able, even in the workplace, we need to be able to have conducive environments for our people. As Brian said, unfortunately, he lost his job due to the stigma at the workplace. And this is now something we look at the employers. Could we have like units in the work environment where now you have people can come to you, like a counseling unit in the environment, so people can come and talk. Although they usually say they feel like they cannot talk to the psychologist in the unit or the psychiatrist in the unit. But if you have many of them, then even if they're not able to come to where you're working station, but you know in your next building, there's a workstation and there's a psychologist there. No one will see me going through, but then you'll be able to seek help. Then also have different trainings for mental health awareness, for mental wellness just generally, so that you can be able to pick it up even when you're going through something. Even our HRs, the team leaders, look out for these people. They're usually very productive, but all of a sudden they're destructive. Something is wrong. Be more concerned, you know, find out, did they lose someone? Did they lose something? Maybe their spouse is going through a process. Be kind to them, give them better roles, and then when you find they're able to work well, then you can switch them back. Have a buddy system at work, that at least your colleagues can work with one another, they can talk to each other. That way, if someone is going through a loss, it's not like a blanket thing and it's only them. No, maybe they can talk to someone, they're able to share, and when they're able to share, we can all come in as a team leader and just to process through that time.
Well, it is the Mental Health Awareness Month, and the theme is actually kindness. That goes a long way in making sure we do not stigmatize those that are living with mental illness, but also be sensitive to those that are experiencing loss and grief. Now, remember, today we don't have a question of the day. We are asking you to actually send through your messages of comfort in a minute, to record or post a message of hope, encouragement, or condolence to those who have lost their jobs, sources of income, or have lost loved ones due to COVID-19. Send those messages to that WhatsApp number. And to start off, we have Caroline Penner, who says, this is not the end of the world. We still have a long way to go. Pray and have faith that the pandemic will soon get away and you'll have back your jobs. Faith moveth mountains. That's Psalms 119 verse 137. Be strong and courageous. A very encouraging message there. Isaiah Moses says, I'd love to send a message of encouragement to my brother Onesmus Kipchumba Murkomen for losing a job and separating from his Jubilee boss during this difficult time we are fighting COVID-19. May the Lord give you strength in these tumultuous times. Yes, politics is at play. The only solutions, we need favor from God through prayers. People cannot help you seek God through prayer. That's Hesbon Kisanya. And we have Melka Diambo, who says, my encouragement is that God has a reason for everything. Be encouraged and trust in him. To all orphans, widows and widowers, people with different abilities, the sick, those in flooded areas, those under quarantine and restricted areas, God will heal you and see you through all this. Amazing messages coming through there. Wazir Kilo says, I'm also looking for a person to motivate me. The fact that you're watching this show, you are in the right place. Elijah Washira says, good initiative, though at the moment Kenyans are busy politicking. I really hope the mainline media will not follow suit. Well, we cannot ignore the politics, but yes, we've got to keep talking about other areas of our lives. Lena Mueni, these are hard times and they're more harder to others than others. I just want to encourage you, no matter the situation you're going through, no matter the pain you're feeling right now, just know there is a brighter day coming. It might not seem so bright right now, but the sun always shines in the morning. Hashtag we shall overcome. Amen and amen to that. Edwin Katai says, for those who are in pain of any kind, God will always be on your side. No matter how the storm is, definitely the sun will shine at the end. Trust in God and let Him take control of your vehicle called life, and you will reach your destination safely. Another here from Joroge Kahianyu who says, read from Philippians 4:6, which says, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done. We've got a lot to be thankful for. But a last one here from Adolf who says, private school teachers are not being paid any amount since February. Yes, we need to remember those in prayer, even as some continue to lose their sources of income. Now, to a lighter note, even as we continue with this broadcast, Your World Creativity at its best, as Romam Katoliki and Rostam take it to the internet to give us a dose of creativity through their well-thought-out video of Kaka Tuchati. They depict the current social media craze of people using Instagram Live, FaceTime, and WhatsApp as they narrate the hardships of living during this COVID-19 era.
Oi, naona mtandao na katika upo kimya sana mkato au kunde imevunjika.
Na utanyoka raundi hii na hivi uwezi bila mimi.
Najikuta Jay-Z, oya unarudi lini?
Kaka, huko amefunga mipaka ila tiketi nilikata nirudi kabla Pasaka.
Ndugu gomza kisusio, mwana kulitafuta. Ngoja umi mwalimu
anapambana yule dada.
Tanga ni mafulia kofia wametoa sanitizer za iliki yani ukipaka unanukia.
Corona ni shai yani bongo kila mtu daktari. Masai kachemsha majani ya mpapai kanywa na sukari.
Buza dimasko wanafua sijui nani kawafundisha.
Huku kuna dada kajifikiza mashetani akapandisha.
Tuweke siasa kando, unajua uchumi unashuka.
Sio bongo tu hadi ngambo watu wamefunga maduka. Hapa nawaza pesa bango benki walokopa wanajuta. Tukisema tukae ndani na hii njaa sitakufa.
Hali inatisha na umaskini tunaumia ni sisi.
Yani bora ufe kwa ukimwi angalau utandika urithi. Kwa hiyo hamna bata, sio kidimbwi, sio tipsi.
Kaka madanga amekata swazi timbi hizo pisi.
Bwana wa mabwana, Mungu wa miungu, Alfa na Omega, nani kama wewe? Bwana wa mabwana, Mungu wa miungu, Alfa na Omega, nani kama wewe?
Hivi unakaa jimbo gani au Marekani vijijini? Unajikinga vipi maana vifo vingi hadi siamini? Au umesharudi uko zako rohoro nini?
We bwana niache mimi nimeze chloroquine.
Umenikumbusha kweli chloroquine ni dawa.
Bado inafanywa uchunguzi ila haijathibitishwa. Ingawa ukinywa haitatarisha ndio maana bado anaigawa. Mimi nakunywa maana nilishika uso kabla ya kunawa.
Eti unaweza ukawa nayo na usionyeshe dalili.
Ewa uko sahihi. Na kingine kuhusu hili ni kwamba mgonjwa wa corona unaweza usimtambue kwa macho. So mtu yote unayemwona mpe mita 2 toka kwako.
Eko kivansleka ndo kinini baba wili.
Ventilator ni mashine kama pafu ya nje ya mwili.
Sijaelewa, hembu nieleweshe kuhusu hili. Nasikia vinauzwa gari basi viwe vingi Mwimbili.
Okay, kirusi cha corona kinashambulia mapafu. Ndipo zinaanza homa, mafua, kifua, alafu nashindwa kupumua na mwili unahitaji tafu. Ventilator ingiza hewa na kuitoa iliyo chafu.
Tuepuke mikusanyiko, kibidi tukae ndani. Tumeambiwa tujifukize vini.
Just move to the next level with the Daily Nation. Every day, every Monday, Junior Sport will move you to the top of your class with KCPE revision papers. To move to a healthier, fitter, and more conscious you, read The Healthy Nation every Tuesday. My network will inspire your career, your passion, your biashara, and your network every Friday. Just move to the truth.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Once I caught a fish alive. 6, 7, 8.
The young ones are at home, and we know how that can go. Don't worry, we've got you.
A lesson will be learned.
-3 times -4.
They can have fun as they learn on NTV.
What does 0 mean? It's just a number that means nothing.
This is so much fun!
It's our secret. NTV, turning on your world. Kids Edutainment in association with Blue Band Peanut Butter.
This is Fact Finder from the BBC.
A victim of revenge porn in Zimbabwe opens up about fighting shame and betrayal.
He sends me a message and he says, "Oh, if you don't come back, you know I have those pictures."
Campaigns marred by misinformation as the UK gears up for a fierce election contest.
And online all the time. But how did the internet start 50 years ago?
Welcome back to your world. Thank you for staying with us. My name is Gladys, Gachanja, and remember today we don't have a question. We are asking you to send through some words of encouragement and, condolences for those who've lost their loved ones, those who've lost their jobs or sources of income. There is that WhatsApp number at the bottom of your screen where you can send those messages and also videos of the same if you'd like to send us videos of you passing on these messages. And speaking of which, we have a couple of them coming through.
Church Livingston at the Ambo. I'm sending this message to those who have lost their loved ones, those who have lost their jobs, the street families that are wondering what they will eat next, those who depend on a daily wage, those who've been laid off because of this unprecedented global pandemic. Now, we are in this pain, multitudes, forgive me if I say together, because our levels are different in terms of what we have experienced. But altogether, we will emerge victorious when all this is done, when all this is finished. And I'm just hoping we will get out of COVID-19, a people with a great awakened conscience, a people who are wary of their own health and safety, a people who are ready to tackle the world with new possibilities to limitless levels. Thank you so much, and take care, sanitize, and observe the public health requirements.
Hello there, my name is Brian Oliwa, and I want to pass my words of encouragement to those who've been hit hard by this pandemic. And to those who've lost their jobs, I want to say, may you keep your calm, keep your focus, and don't lose your hope, because after the pandemic, I believe you shall get back to your jobs, and if not, you shall get better jobs than the ones you had previously. And to those who've been separated from their families, I want to say, may you keep safety and calm, and be patient, because in the end, we want you to reunite with your families in good health and shape, and rejoice together. And for those who lost their loved ones to this pandemic, I want to say, may you gather strength and courage to face through this, and we shall pray together with you so that you may have that resilience.
Hello Kenyans, this is a bad time to pass greetings, but again it's a nice time, for we have to thank the Lord for the far we have come. I know the world is a standstill, things are not working out. The corona pandemic has hit us hard. Kenya has not been spared either. People have lost their jobs. Kids are not going to school. We have lost thousands all over the world. Children have lost their parents. Parents have lost their children. The world all over is crying, shedding tears. In Kenya we have been hit. We being a small economy, things have not worked out. We are struggling so much. But my message tonight to Kenyans, most of those who have lost jobs, is one: there is light beyond the tunnel. There is hope. Yes, it's said that when dawn approaches, it becomes darker. I know after Corona, everything shall be normal. We shall go back to our normal lives. So dear Kenyans, those who have lost jobs, I included, never cast a day you are born. Thank God for you have survived this pandemic. Things will get better. We shall overcome the storm. Be strong. Be steadfast.
Hii corona itafika kikomo. Maisha itakoma, mbali ni koma imewekwa kwenye maisha. Mwisho wa yote tutafurahi wote, kazini utarudi zote, kwani corona haitafika.
Those are messages coming from you, even as we encourage each other going through this really unprecedented times. Remember, you can send your video on that WhatsApp number, and of course, you can send a message of encouragement and condolence to those that have lost their loved ones during this COVID-19 season using that hashtag new normal. And speaking of our conversation today, loss and grief, we're also combining it with mental health, because it's the Mental Health Awareness Month. And speaking of which, I have Dr. Priscilla Macau, who is a medical doctor and psychiatry resident here in studio. We have Eddie Kimani, who is a mental health champion. Brian Emmanuel, who is joining us virtually, who's got lived experience with loss and grief and mental illness. We are also joined from Uganda by Michael Katamba, who also has lived experience with loss and grief. He'll be joining us on phone. And Rosa Sanao, who is a counseling psychologist. But even as we talk about loss, the late Kenya Airways captain Daudi Kimoyo Kibati was laid to rest at his Kitui home in early April. The captain is among the Kenyans who have lost their battle with COVID-19 here in Kenya. He was eulogized as a brave man who paid with his life for taking one last flight out of New York in March to bring home hundreds of Kenyans from the heart of a pandemic in the U.S. NTV's Brenda Wanga with that report.
In these uncertain times, his colleagues braved the restrictions to afford him that last respect. They know that in line with the government regulations on social distancing, they will not be taking his body to Kitui for burial. So they say their final goodbyes now. Here in the city, as the body of the late Kenya Airways Captain Daudi Kibati leaves for his final resting place. Kibati was one of 4 people who have lost their lives to the COVID-19 disease here in Kenya. The late captain is believed to have contracted the disease during his last flight right before the ban on international flights was effected. The piloted Kenya Airways' final mercy flight out of New York, bringing home hundreds of Kenyans who are seeking to get back before the pandemic spread any further.
Captain Kibati managed to evacuate many Kenyans and non-Kenyans from the United States back into our country, but only for him to succumb to the same disease. In other words, he made the ultimate sacrifice.
He is said to have gone into quarantine soon after his arrival back home. 5 days into his quarantine, he collapsed at the hotel and was rushed to hospital to manage complications he had developed. He was buried at his Kavisuni village home in Kitui County. Brenda Wanga, NTV.
And we offer our condolences to all those that have lost the battle to COVID-19 and their loved ones, and of course also others who've lost their loved ones to other circumstances. And speaking of which, Michael Katamba joins us now from Uganda. And Michael, you have lived experience with loss and grief, having lost 2 relatives. What's your story?
Hello. Yes.
What is your story?
Okay. I'm Mike Katamba from Uganda. My brother called the politician on the 14th of April. So it was one morning when we went to the government hospital, Old China Uganda Friendship Hospital, where my brother was getting the medications and all his treatment. So when we reached the hospital, the medical personnel just told us, go out from here, this place is confined for COVID. So they sent us to the National Hospital, Mulago. When we reached there, on the assessment, they just told us, no, here we are only, the place is gazetted for COVID and the accidents. Move on to Chirudu. Chirudu is also another referral hospital, a national referral hospital. We still moved to Chirudu Referral Hospital with my brother. But when we reached there, we only found one doctor working on over 50 people, critically ill. Ambulances were bringing in so many people to the hospital, but there was only one doctor. And we had to stay on the counter for over 3 hours, not attended to, until my brother passed away.
Our condolences. You also have another family member that you lost only a week after that?
Yes, it was my auntie who, actually when my brother died, we did not tell her my brother died because we were scared. She was a bit sick and we thought the shock might also kill her. But later she learned about it after like 4 days. Then we had to rush her to hospital. She had a heart attack. We rushed her to hospital. But on our way, we found the police patrol which stopped us. And they told us we are not supposed to move using the vehicle we are moving on. So we requested them to put our patient on the patrol. They take us to hospital and then we settle down our offense. They refused, and the tussle was for over 40 minutes until the patient died. Instantly there, they decided to drive off. They did not even listen. They drove off and left us there with the dead body. the vehicle.
We are so sorry for your experience, Michael. And have you been able to to rest your loved ones?
Yeah, we buried them, but they are unceremonious. Because the law in Uganda says only 10, not over 10 people should bury the dead body. So we had to travel long distances. But we thank God, we have a friend working in the police funeral service who offered us transport. And they transported our bodies to the different destinations where we buried them.
Michael, that is a lot of loss to deal with in such a short time. How are you coping?
Personally, I'm a counselor. I'm an NTV counselor and I'm strong, but the son, my brother left me with a son who is 12 years. It's a painful experience for him. Though even the family members are still going through a painful moment. We are still thinking towards the negligence of the hospital that led to the death of our brother, because for over 8 hours, nobody attended to him. They only used to push us away until the boy died. So that's the only pain. We are nothing, but yeah, I'm okay. Personally, I'm okay.
With the recent lockdown in Uganda, I'm sure you're not able to see your family members at the same time or even go through the normal rituals. How has that impacted you?
It has really impacted us negatively. We only had to make phone calls to different people and inform them this man has died. So 10 of us went and buried him in the village. We are hoping that this lockdown will go away anytime, and then we shall converge and maybe make a formal send-off to our brother.
Okay, condolences to you, Michael, and your family. We pray for comfort and peace even as you deal with the grieving process. Thank you for joining us from Uganda.
Yeah, but there is this one thing I would like to tell you.
Yes.
So many people are dying in the hospitals and attended to, because most of the personnel, the medical personnel, are now attending to COVID cases. And the government seems not to even be minding about it. Actually, they don't know what is going on in the hospitals, but very many people. That same day my brother died, I witnessed 4 other people dying just on the counter, unattended to.
We hear you.
It is happening all over the hospitals in Uganda.
We hear you, Michael, and we pray that times will get better even as we go along. Thank you for joining us.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Rosa, just listening to Michael, he is a representation of many who've lost their loved ones during this pandemic, some to COVID-19 and others to other ailments. What and how would you recommend they deal with loss and grief, considering the rituals cannot be done as usual?
Yes, thank you, Gladys. So first of all, I'd like to empathize with the families of the families who've lost their loved ones, either through COVID or any other circumstances. And even as Michael was sharing, I could hear the anger in his voice when he's talking about the negligence and not being able to access fast medical attention. And that is a stage of grief in itself. And even as you're asking about coping, one of the things that funerals help us is by helping us to get in touch with the reality of the loss. Funerals help us to give comfort and offer our support, you know, because especially as an African society, we have what people call the maombolezi or the wakes, where people come for a period of either 7 days to 14 days and they condole with the family, they run errands, they just basically offer the gift of presence, something that we do not have now. The other thing that funerals help us is they begin begin the mourning process, because as we go through the process and the rituals, it sort of helps us to get in touch and to begin mourning and even offer an expression of the grief, because one of the things about grief is that it needs to be expressed. So one thing is that grief is normal. It is a natural reaction to an abnormal thing, which is loss. And so even as we are looking at the death of our loved ones, the first thing is to acknowledge, because sometimes denial, even though it helps us in the initial moments for survival and self-preservation, when it is prolonged, it causes us to freeze and become numb. So when we are not processing and expressing our emotions, or even acknowledging that our loved one is dead, we tend to use platitudes like they've gone to heaven, you know, they've gone away, they grew wings in the case of child loss. But when we begin to acknowledge that what has happened is death, and that our loved ones are not breathing and they are not coming back, that is the first step, which is just acknowledging that my loved one is dead. And after the acknowledgement, the other thing is to honor your feelings, because when you acknowledge, there is like a wave and a sea of emotions, and you feel everything and nothing at the same time, and you feel like this is abnormal, especially for people who are not used to expressing their emotion. So I encourage people to honor their feelings. Whatever you're feeling is normal. It is valid and it is okay. So whatever you're feeling, don't try to ask, is this right or wrong? Your feelings are just as they are. They are not right, they are not wrong. Allow yourself to feel them. You can talk to someone you trust, someone who will just listen. And I know presence right now may be difficult, but we thank God for technology, that you can use FaceTime, you can use WhatsApp, you can use video calls, Zoom and the like, to just talk to people who can be a support system. Reach out for professional care, someone who will just listen to you and allow you to share your feelings as they are. You can journal, write down, how am I feeling about this loss? For example, in Michael's case, if they were to journal, one of the things I would ask is for them to journal about the anger towards the police officers, the anger towards the medical doctors, you know, the anger to even feeling helpless, the helplessness of, this is COVID, I do not know where it has come from, it has robbed me of my loved ones, and I am not even able to give them a proper send-off. For them that were not even able to attend the burial, you can even journal about the frustration, the anger of not being able to touch your loved one, for example, and even just hold them one last time, or be there when they passed on. So honoring your feelings. The other thing is practice gratitude. And being thankful for what we have. Gratitude has been found to be a mood booster, because I am looking at what I have left, and in the midst of grief, I imagine that that must be difficult. But one of the things that you can look at is, look around you, what do you have? Even as much as guilt and blame may make you feel guilty for being the one who survived, because you may be feeling like I should have died, or I should have died instead of my child in the case of child loss. So look out for things that can lift up your mood. Eat well. Eat a balanced diet. I know in grief, you may be tempted to junk up or not eat and sleep well, but get those 8 hours of sleep, because it allows your body to recharge. Grieving needs a lot of energy, and it takes even your physical energy, because you are expending and working out difficult and uncomfortable emotions. So you need to rest, you need to be in good physical shape. Get out and smell the air. sunshine is good for you. You know, sunshine has been seen especially to even be a recommendation for patients going through depression, because those 15 minutes, 30 minutes of just being in the sun, research shows that it just automatically lifts the moods of people. So the small things that we can do to get our energies up, express our emotion, and find social support within the limits of public health safety.
Very well said, Rosa Sanao. We now take a short break, but when we come back, there are the healthcare workers at the front line who face loss on a day-to-day. How do they cope with this? Dr. Priscilla will be giving us pointers on the same right after this. Stay with us.
This is Fact Finder from the BBC.
A victim of revenge porn in Zimbabwe opens up about fighting shame and betrayal.
He sends me a message and he says, "Oh, if you don't come back, you know I have those pictures."
Campaigns marred by misinformation as the UK gears up for a fierce election contest.
And online all the time. But how did the internet start 50 years ago?
I'm leaving the country, Debbie, tonight. Please come with me too, Debbie. And where will I be meeting you?
So why were you asking for her address then? To tell Rocco her whereabouts? Is that it?
Wasn't me. My cell phone is missing. Maybe stolen.
I've had enough. Stop this already. You've already been caught. When will you stop lying to us?
But I am telling you the truth. If you don't believe me, then go search the whole house for my phone, but you'll never find it because I'm telling you it's missing.
You're part of Rocco's syndicate.
Rosemary Bermudez, you are hereby under arrest for human trafficking and attempted murder.
Agatha Magdiba, you are under arrest for crimes of kidnapping and human trafficking.
It's your world, the conversation this morning, coping with loss and grief. And speaking of which, the family of the late James Oyugi Onyango has since sued the government over the undignified burial and are seeking court orders to exhume the body. Joanna Koth Ajuang, the deceased younger sister, and Brian Thomas Oyugi, his third-born son, also want an autopsy carried out to ascertain the real cause of his death. NTV's Oko Kusa with that report.
In the thick of the night, under the watchful eye of the police, healthcare personnel, fully kitted, hauled the late James Oyugi's body, draped in a body bag, and unceremoniously tossed it into a shallow grave, stirring debate on just how to balance between managing public health and upholding the dignity of the dead. Now his son Brian Thomas Oyugi and his younger sister Joan Akoth Ojuang are officially demanding that the government sheds light on the darkness around this quick night burial.
Hata barua hatuna. Hatujui nini nimeua. Hata baba tulipomta hatuna. Tuko hivyo nyona tuona.
The duo is demanding that should it be found that the former Kenya Ports Authority man died of COVID-19, then he should be offered a decent burial in accordance with the World Health Organization guidelines on the safe management of a coronavirus body.
Babangu atolewe, azikwe kama binadamu. Hivi si mtu wa utupwa hivyo, si haki hata kidogo.
The family also wants to be allowed to nominate a maximum of 15 people from immediate or extended family to witness the autopsy, and that all of them be provided with protective gear by the Ministry of Health during the post-mortem. In a lawsuit filed at the High Court in Siaya, the two petitioners have listed Michael Owuor Osodo, Chief of Simur Kondiek location, as the first respondent, Health Cabinet Secretary Mutai Kagwe as the second, Attorney General as the third, and Law Society of Kenya as an interested party. Siaya Senator James Orengo has also joined the list of those calling for answers after he petitioned the ad hoc committee on COVID-19 situation in Kenya to investigate and report to the Senate the reason and justification of the night burial, the cause of Oyugi's death, why the body was not buried in a coffin, and why the family was not consulted prior to the burial. Meanwhile, top government officials visited Siaya County on Wednesday following its first confirmed COVID-19 death. The team, which included Ministry of Health Acting Director General Dr. Patrick Amoth and government spokesman Cyrus Oguna, toured various places, including the home of the late James Oyugi, the quarantine center located inside the Kenya Medical Training College Siaya campus, where 64 people believed to have had primary and secondary contact with the deceased have been isolated, and Siaya County Referral Hospital, where an isolation ward has been set up.
Definitely a story there that brings to questions. Dr. Priscilla, two things that stand out: prolonged grief for this family and, of course, the lack of closure even as they pursue justice for their loved one. How do they cope with this?
So, yeah, as was mentioned earlier, the burial process already on its own is a way of gaining closure. Even as this, when you're having your loved one, going through the funeral rites and rituals, and when you put them down there and the prayers that are said and the communism, all that brings about the closure that we're looking for, which is something that most families currently are not getting, So there's something called, there's prolonged grief, which can actually lead to a mental illness at the end, because you can get depressed, can get depressive symptoms, which is something now we'll need to have medications for that, which is, unfortunately, one of the post-COVID-19 mental health issues that we'll have to deal with, because now, there's no closure for the family. So it's something that we definitely are on the lookout for as mental health professionals, so that we can be able to manage this pandemic and its effects thereof after that. Yes.
Okay, Eddie Kimani, you are a mental health champion and you're also in touch with others that walk in these shoes. How important is it to get closure, especially when you're dealing with mental illness?
Well, it's important. I mean, it's what sort of brings to some form of an understanding, or even to be able to embrace what has just happened to you. And in the point of losing a loved one, a closure definitely always comes to play here, and be able to embrace what has just happened, being able to even deal with what you're going through yourself personally. And the most affected bit here, of course, is our mental well-being. And of course, as the discussion goes, loss and grief is just part of the process. So closure will help you be able to deal with that process. It could bring to an understanding what just happened. It will bring to an understanding now, how are you going to deal with what you're going to have to face after you've lost that loved one? How are you going to deal with that occasion where you've lost a job? How will you deal with how you're going to respond to maybe losing your business? So closure is a very important aspect of this, and how we can be able to come, even to be able to have that closure ourselves, is understanding that it's all a process. It cannot be instant. It cannot be able to be, it's not a switch where you can just have an understanding immediately. So first understanding that you have to grieve, you have to understand the process, and you have to be part of that journey to be able to come to some form of way of understanding what has just happened. And again, it applies to either losing a loved one, losing that job, losing that business, losing that income that you're dependent on, especially in this period that we are going through. Unprecedented. I mean, it can even, I think it is even worse right now because we are dealing with unprecedented times. We've not experienced it. I don't think there's anybody alive right now who might have experienced the 1920s when we had the Spanish flu?
Yes, the 1918.
So we don't have any way of reference to know how people dealt with that scourge at the time. So right now we're walking blind. As much as we have various respective governments all over the world trying to deal with it in their own particular way, certain organizations trying to come up with vaccines and find a solution to all this. We're all walking in the dark. But having that closure and that understanding will help us to cope, because we all rely on coping mechanisms when it comes to exactly dealing with loss, dealing with grief. So a sense of closure is very, very important. But first, it starts with you understanding that it's a process.
And Brian Emmanuel, let me bring you into this conversation because it is also important to be in touch with other people. Are you part of a support group that walks with you?
Yes.
Are you part of a support group that walks with you in this journey?
Yes, I am. I have a support group that I'm in, and we mostly communicate using WhatsApp. So it's a virtual thing. So and within the group we also have psychologists who are among us. So what we do whenever any one of us has a challenge, we just air it out. And if it's something that can be solved in the group, you set an appointment with the psychologist, and you can, he or she can get a follow-up with the psychologist. So yeah, I'm in one, and it has been helping me a lot.
By giving you the feeling of community. Daktari, we were earlier talking about our frontline healthcare workers who have to come to terms with loss on a daily basis because of their job. How do they cope with this?
First of all, it's not easy, given that every day, there's COVID-19 and then there are other diseases. So every day, even prior to this pandemic, they were still having losses. But what the pandemic has done is now there's more anxiety about it. Like, okay, before you had these diseases, you're not so sure if you could, you're comfortable going home, but then now you're going home and the family is not so receptive because they're also anxious and scared. You're already scared that you can give it, maybe you got it from a patient and you're giving it out, but they're also scared that like maybe you're bringing it home, so there's that, which also increases the anxiety levels for our healthcare workers. So one of the things we're really encouraging is something called debriefing, where after every session, especially the ones who are working in the isolation centers, after every session they go through a debrief during the weekly debrief session, so that you can just be in contact with a mental health professional, so you can go through what you went through in your week. If you lost someone or you saw people in pain, because there's that aspect of you're able to see someone else going through pain and you feel it as a healthcare worker. So there's that, they go through the debriefs, then you're doing different trainings just to empower them with the psychological first aid that they can use for themselves and to their patients also. Then also we're really, really pushing for self-care. We are pushing for them to, one, just know yourself, don't do, above, like we are trying to have our healthcare workers not experience burnout, because as we know, we don't have so many. So we don't want them to have burnout and then you have to put someone off on leave. Who's going to replace that person? So we were saying, take care of yourself, exercise, eat well, sleep well. And when you feel like you can't, like at that particular moment, you just cannot be productive. Because remember, healthcare workers are working with human beings. So if you feel like you cannot be productive yourself, or somebody tells you, kindly take a step back, just do it. It's a marathon. This is a marathon. You're not sprinting like in the next 5 weeks we'll have finished. No. It's something you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So we're encouraging ourselves to, one, watch out for the burnout, be our other, brother's keeper. When you're in your shift and you notice, because our healthcare workers work together, it's really a teamwork. So when you notice that the other person has, signs that are not, quote unquote, they are normal, it would be good to seek help. And as you said, we have debrief sessions, so we're having mental health professionals in different counties dealing with this.
And across the borders in Ecuador, Darwin Castillo recounts his experience looking for his father's body in a crowded morgue in Guayaquil, the city at the heart of the country's coronavirus crisis. Clearly another case here that would lead to prolonged grief and lack of closure up until you can get your loved one. But even as we go through this season, which you are calling a marathon for all of us, how do you ensure that you come out of it unscathed?
Coming out of it unscathed, that's a bit tricky, because but the idea is we are usually, human beings are resilient beings. We have the energy to push through. So you talk to yourself, you give yourself hope every morning when you wake up. Tell yourself you can do this. Today is another day. It's a brand new day. Self-talk and push yourself to great limits. Then have a routine. I think I'm really big on that. Have a routine. When you wake up in the morning, if you're a morning exercise person, the 30 minutes that you want to incorporate in your day, do them in the morning. Have your meals at the time, not specific times that you're supposed to have them. If you're if you're a 5-meal person a day, or you do 3 meals a day, have your specific meals. If you have kids at home, create a routine for them too, so that they don't create stressors for you, so that at the end of all this pandemic, we are all on the same page. You don't want to be in a situation where you're frustrated and then you're taking out your frustrations on somebody else. So you have to have your routine there. You have to do your self-cares. You have to eat correctly. Sleep is very, very important. Currently, I know many people are watching a lot of screens and not really taking enough time to rest. Sleep is really, really important. And watch out for the negative coping mechanisms. We are noticing that many people are into substance use now. They're taking a lot of alcohol, which is not a positive coping mechanism, because what will happen? You'll end up taking your substance, then you're not dealing with your emotions correctly. You're frustrating, you're letting your anger on other people. Eventually, you might actually be overdoing it, and then you will not able to function. When people are told, okay, now you can go back to work, you can't cope with that. You're not able to function at work. You get an alcohol use disorder, which is now a mental illness. So we are really trying to have positive coping mechanisms. Yes.
Okay, now elsewhere, families in Manaus, Brazil, are burying their loved ones at the Taruma Cemetery, where new graves are being dug for suspected and confirmed victims of the new coronavirus as the city fights horrific pandemic conditions. Rosa, just the look of that can give you anxiety, and you were talking about anticipatory grieving. Is there something called delayed grieving?
Yes, there is. And delayed grieving is especially in situations where you are either stuck in denial, or in situations where you are not able to have closure, and looking even at the situation, like for the families who are now engaged in a lawsuit about the body of their loved one, like the one in Ecuador who is looking for their father, the ones who have to wait for prolonged autopsies. And so they sort of have to pause dealing with their emotions to kind of deal with the day-to-day. So I think the thing is, even about coping, is as we are looking at public safety and doing the burials with 10 people, some of the things you can do maybe is you can talk to a clergy and decide that we can have 10 people do one service and another 10 people take another service concurrently, or wherever you are, if you're separated from the burial, you can FaceTime in real time the burial. You can also hold a small ceremony wherever you are. You may not do the burial, but you can decide to have pictures of your loved one, light a candle, get some friends on phone, talk about your loved one, do your prayers or whatever lifts up your spirit. Just do a small ceremony in reminder of your loved one. You can do a memorial online. You can begin a pictorial, a picture book online. You can ask loved ones to send you memories of how they remember this person. And so in time, as you keep going through them, it sort of also helps you to fast track and begin that grieving process where you feel that you have been stuck.
Now, in Nigeria, a grave digger speaks of a dramatic increase in the number of bodies to be buried daily in Kano in northern Nigeria in what the authorities had called mysterious deaths. However, after carrying out door-to-door investigations and interviewing bereaved relatives, authorities attributed most of those deaths to the novel coronavirus. Earlier, the rise in the number of deaths in that Kano state had also been attributed to the cutting down of medical services of other ailments. Now, Dr. Priscilla, it is important to have support groups, and in this case, those in the front line, including yourself. Is this something that is a reality?
We are trying to make it a reality because, as I said, we've started the telecounseling, we are starting the debrief sessions, which is something that we were not doing before for our healthcare workers. So now it is, we're trying to also set up the buddy system, as I was telling you before, something that was not there before. So it's, I feel like also, as much as we are saying there's the negative aspect of the COVID-19 pandemic, there's a positive part where now we are appreciating our mental health. We are able to say, okay, we are healthcare workers. Yes, we are not supernatural. You know, we also have emotions and feelings, and we need people to take care of us also. So that is also something that we are really putting up. We have online platforms where now they do the trainings. We have online platforms for the support groups that are coming in. You can just register. We have many organizations that are coming up just to offer that online telecounseling, telepsychiatry to our healthcare workers.
Etike Mani, what is the importance of therapy, and is this something that you're pushing for within your circles?
Well, therapy definitely is very important, especially when you have extreme conditions which need professional attention. But you know, therapy could be something as simple as having a conversation. Starting a conversation that would help you to open up, or even helping somebody to open up through a conversation. And I think if you ask me, is that conversation and talking, especially in these unprecedented times that we are going through right now, is very important. It could be the simplest form of therapy that you can instantly be able to make use of to be able to deal with what you're going through. And I think before we escalating it to a point now you get help, when you see somebody who you might suspect might need or might be going through a mental health challenge, just starting that conversation, just talking and finding out how they are, being concerned, being able to reach out to them is very, very, very important, and also a very important form of therapy. Like what Dr. Macau has touched on even from the beginning, this buddy system is very important. Checking up on each other, finding out how you are. You could actually deliberately form a WhatsApp group. Your family, you could form a WhatsApp group, and every morning at a certain particular time, you just ask guys to just check in on each other. How is everybody doing? Respond by either just sending that message, send a photo of where you are, how you are, and just be able to connect with the rest of the family. You can also do it in just a group of friends or the existing WhatsApp groups that you have. Checking up on each other every morning when you wake up, especially in these times, because a lot of us, and I would say this, men are having a hard time, and of course with the fact that we rarely, or we've not really been good at embracing what we are feeling. You might be in a WhatsApp group You have a friend you think they're okay, but they could be just crashing because of what they're going through. They have their own individual challenges that they're going through. But just that, how are you, message in the morning to each member, and every member in that group responds. It could be the simplest and maybe the cheapest form of therapy that you would need to utilize to be able to just keep tabs of each other. And of course, self-care, which is also very important. I'm not saying you talk to yourself, but it's good just to check up on yourself and just see how you're doing and the things that you're doing that, of course, benefit how your mental health is, the right thoughts, the right moods, and just checking in on yourself also. It's very important. Self-care, very important.
Speaking of which, Brian Emmanuel, you were talking about coping mechanisms. Therapy is important for you, but you've taken up other coping mechanisms, right?
Yes, I have. Right now I'm doing art therapy, and it has helped me a lot in taking my mind off things and helping me even, vent out and express my emotions and what I feel in a different way.
And when you say art, you're talking about drawing, painting?
Yeah, drawing. Yeah, I do drawings. I do sketches. I doodle. I paint. So that's what I've been occupying myself with. Also, music, playing music instruments also has helped a lot. And keeping your mind active helps you. Has really helped me even focus my emotions in positively. It has really helped me focus what I feel and my emotions positively.
Rosa, just listening to Brian, clearly that is something that most of us should take up even as we have all this time in our hands. What else can you suggest?
I'd say anything that makes you feel better. Anything that lifts up your spirit, what have you been running to in the other times that works for wellness? Key point, works for wellness. So you may have been running to your alcohol, but that doesn't work for long-term wellness. So you can have yoga, you can have prayer, meditation, exercise, even watching cats or dogs or babies, cooking. There are people who just interacting with nature helps renew their energy. For some, it's reading. For some, it's listening to music like Brian. Others, it's writing. Writing down your thoughts and how you're feeling, catching up on loved ones, and even sometimes things like reaching out and offering other people help will in turn make you feel better and recharge you. Staying away from negative news and too much media, just consume what is necessary. Get factual information so that you're not working from rumors and hearsays that in turn lift your anxiety while that information is not factual. So things that are able to recharge you, relax you, and make you feel calm before you have to get to a point where you're either being admitted or being put on meds.
Okay, and even as we talk about loss and grief, did you know that there are very many elements of loss and grief that you can actually focus your mind on? Did you know there is no set timetable for grief? You may start to feel better in 6 to 8 weeks, according to experts, but the whole process can actually last anywhere between 6 months to 4 years. Now, also, did you know men suffer at least as much from bereavement as women? Well, contrary to the popular stereotype that women are more dependent and emotional, widowers also often suffer more grief than widows. A person who is still grieving may seem lazy or disinterested, but loved ones should remember that they may also be a sign of depression. And still focusing on the effects of COVID-19 in our lives, Athens' tourist industry has ground to a halt, with planes grounded and restaurants, museums and archaeological monuments all closed due to the coronavirus. Owners of small apartments who had been renting them on the Airbnb platform in order to provide income during the financial crisis are once again struggling. This has left a huge hole in the Greek economy, which had been recovering from a decade of crisis.
We don't have tourists coming to Greece, so it's going to be a time for reflection. Some homes were never meant to be Airbnbs, but went into short-term rental because it was really fashionable. So we're going to see a lot of houses returning back to normal long-term rental. My hope is that we're gonna start having tourists back in Athens, and God forbid if we don't. That's gonna be really bad for everyone, not just for me. And these houses are small and designed for people to come and go. They are not meant for long-term rental. But I'm gonna think about it if things are really bad and it lasts a long time.
Elsewhere, with New York's nightlife spots closed, digital dance parties are all the rave as DJs stream sets while revelers don their favorite outfits for clubs online. This enables them to check out every once in a while to keep sane and draw away from the COVID-19 reality.
I miss being with people. I mean, that's always what it, I mean, the music and the people, like, it went hand in hand my whole life, you know, and, you know, I'm not the DJ who goes up on a stage with sunglasses on and like, you know, sticks to myself. I'm the crowd surfing DJ. I'm the one out there taking the drink right from your hand and like giving you mine, you know, and that part is really hard to get over. But I mean, weird when like I hear every 3 to 5 minutes an ambulance screaming by my building, and I see people getting pulled out of the building. It's hard to just put on like the fun face and turn on the music, and people they're always gonna appreciate it, because we get the news all day and we get depressed all day. We see this is our reality, we're seeing it, but we can also check out every once in a while to keep like our souls like clean and keep positive and hopeful. I mean, hope is what it's all about. Like,
and yes, even as we talk about loss and grief, we're all about positivity. Remember, today we didn't have a question of the day. We asked you to send a video or a message of hope and encouragement. And of course, condolences for those who've lost loved ones or have experienced any type of loss. And speaking of which, we have some more home videos from you.
Hey there, my name is Ruth. I'm from Nakuru, and I want to tell all those families and individuals who have lost their jobs. I want to tell them that there's hope after everything. So don't worry. Let's just follow the rules, like staying inside, sanitizing, yeah, and hopefully when this pandemic is over, we can go back to our works. For now, let's just abide by the rules and don't lose hope, because we know you're going to get your jobs back as per the government. We are praying for our government as Kenyans, and we are hoping that everything is going to be so well.
Thank you for sending through those videos. And of course, we've asked you to also give us your messages on that hashtag new normal. And speaking of which, we have Agnes Supeo who says, watching from Rongai, may God answer all their asked questions in the minds of all those going through grief. We continue praying for them. Another one here from Veronica Mweni who says, it's hard times indeed, but let's not lose hope. It will come to pass. Another from African teacher David Kenya 7 says, may God forgive us and may He also bless us. Another from Isaac Maweu: to all who are going through loss and grief of any kind as a result of the current traumatic events, I can imagine how this could be to you. It must be tough for you, but tough times don't last, but tough people do. You will overcome. May the Lord God Almighty comfort you. We say amen and keep that conversation going on that hashtag new normal, even as we encourage each other during these uncertain times. And at this point, I would like to thank all my guests who joined in, but even as I let them go, I'll start off with Eddie Kimani, who is a mental health champion. What is your message of encouragement?
Well, I believe we are all in this together. We are all going through these unprecedented times, and it's really hitting us, of course, in different ways individually, but collectively we are all going through this. So my encouragement is try to make the best of these times. A lot of things are going to change. We might not go back to the normal that we knew. So it's a matter of embracing and just making the best of what's happening right now. How we work, how our children go to or take up their studies, how we relate, our social aspect as social beings is going to change. So I think it's just a matter of adapting and being, more importantly, very positive, because we are going to prevail. And I know we will come out better and positive, depending on how we handle what we are going through right now. If you're going through loss and grief, reach out to a friend, and also if you see a friend or a family member going through that, also please reach out to them, because it's the only connection that we have now. And of course, technology gives us this opportunity to connect and be together as always, but virtually and in many different ways. But for now, hope and stay positive.
Eddie Kimani, thank you for joining us. We now cross over to Rosa. And now, as a psychologist, you've given us a lot of wisdom, but what are your messages of encouragement?
Grieve. Allow yourself to express your emotions so that you may channel the resources you have to look forward. Remember, you have a lot of resources. Just grieve and allow yourself. Then look for skills within you. For those who've lost their jobs, can you start planting maybe vegetables in your balcony? Can you look for someone to barter skill for service or skill for food? Something that will keep you afloat. And remember, this too shall pass. Human beings throughout the history of time have been found to be resilient and adapt to whatever circumstance. So hang in there. This too shall pass.
Amen to that. We now are joined by Brian Emmanuel. What is your message of encouragement shortly?
What I'll say, what I'll end with is that anxiety and fear are contagious, but also compassion. So in this period, let's do our best to show some kindness to people. Let's be there for people. If you're able to help others, let's say financially or with foodstuffs, emotionally, go there and just share some love. So that's all I have to say. And also, let's not let fear overcome us.
All right. Thank you, Brian, for joining us. And of course, Dr. Priscilla, your message.
So in the spirit of the Mental Health Awareness Month, be kind to one another. You don't know what someone is going through. And also, it's okay not to be okay. Seek help from the mental health professionals. We are all here. We want to help each other to have proper and good mental health.
Thank you so much, Dr. Priscilla Makawe, and for all that to join me on this very critical conversation. My name is Gladys Gachanja, and you've been watching Your World. We shall see you tomorrow, bright and early, 7 a.m. right here. But remember, there's an opportunity for you to work out from 6:30 a.m. See you then.